Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Comic Book School Live. I'm your host, Buddy Scalera, joined by Emmy award-winning writer Mike Fasolo. We don't look anything like him, like at all. No, I am your host, your guest host, filling in. You know, I've done the joke 3 times, Kris, and it kills every time. It does.
Does it?
No, I think so. I mean, I don't know. I can't see anybody or hear anybody. They don't tell me if it's working or not. So, I am your host, Michael Dolce, joined by my good friend, the lovely and talented Miss Kris Simon. How you doing, Kris?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Mike. I'm happy to be here.
Don't think I just say lovely to all the female guests. I say it to everyone. When Hassan is on, he is lovely as well. When Buddy is on, I say that as well. So
I'm happy to hear that.
I'm an equal opportunity lovelier. I think I just made a word. Tonight, we will be discussing the ever expanding battle of Patreon versus Substack. And I did not actually make any graphics for this, so it's just the two of us. I hope that's good enough for the audience out there.
Let's hope.
I don't think we have any. Oh, we have one audience member now, so that's good. All right, so whoever's out there, I hope it's good enough for you guys. So Kris, tell everyone, obviously, your street creds. You and I go way back to the Image Comics days. Give a 30-second update for all those folks who want to know. Who are you? What do you do? And why are you such an expert in this industry?
Oh my gosh. Well, it goes back 20 years this year. 2004 is when I got my first book published at Image Comics. Yes. So I was editor-in-chief of Shadowline for about 7 years at Image and edited, went through video games, doing licensed IPs, blah, blah, blah. And now currently I am group editor for collections, graphic novels, and new initiatives at IDW Publishing. So that is my long history.
And you are now the current author of the GeekChic Promotions Substack.
Correct.
Look at that. See, it's almost as if we planned it. Look at that.
Look at that.
GeekChic.substack.com.
Yes.
And tell us, what would people expect to find at the GeekChic Substack?
It is every Wednesday at noon that a new Substack is released, and it is my thoughts on life, pop culture, comics, and whatever else I feel like. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but I will say the majority of it does focus on the comic book industry as well as the entertainment industry. So things like strikes, I do interviews with other professionals, and then I also go in a little bit into my history and, random stuff like that. So
that's the stuff I enjoy the most, actually, is hearing the inside base. I'm an inside baseball, inside comics kind of person. So we've known each other for a long time, and through your Substack, I've actually heard stories I've never heard before, or read stories I've never heard before. So I actually kind of dig that. I think that's there's something really neat about that. So
I have lots.
Well, is there anything off the top of your head that you have published already that you've gotten the most response from, story-wise?
Story-wise, it's weird. The biggest response I got was the top 10 things writers do that editors hate. That got the most response.
I could see that.
So yeah, that was a little bit hilarious to me because, clearly then it's people who are aspiring, who are reading the Substack. However, it was the writers' contest that I told the inside story about back when I did that at Image. I held a contest for writers, and the reward was a 3-issue miniseries that had covers drawn by Image partners, including Jim Lee, which was a biggie, and what went on behind the scenes of that contest, which was lawsuits and all sorts of fun stuff.
Refresh my memory on that, because that's actually a pretty I remember that stack, and that was a really cool one. What was the lawsuits over, though? Was it over was it post leaving Image? Yeah, okay.
No,
all right. It wasn't the contest itself, though, right?
It was the contest itself. So it was I was sued as well as Image. We were both sued by the artist. So the artist that was supposed to be doing the winning entry was Francesco. And
that's right. Yes.
Was hired on to just it was a page rate, and he would get, everybody would get back end. Obviously it's Image, so that's what you get. However, he drew a headshot sketch of the winning character and then claimed he had ownership of it because he created the look of her. And
Got it.
he sued, me and Image, and which was dumb. Let's be real. You can't sue Image. They have lawyers that can wipe the floor with you.
Also, especially if you'd want to work for Image again, right? I mean, wouldn't that be a dumb thing to do?
Correct. So yeah, they made short work of it. So and basically he settled. I mean, and he's gonna find this because he's still angry at me. We're talking over a decade later, and he still comes after me on social media. This guy. So yeah. So
well, I don't think he's bearing a grudge then.
yeah. I mean, have you heard of him? Do you know his work?
I do know. I do know Francesco. Yeah.
Right. Everybody knew Francesco for a bit.
Yeah. This is a Jimmy Kimmel, Aaron Rodgers thing going on now. I like it. It. We'll call him Francesco Karen.
Yeah.
So what was the number one rule that you got out of that? And I'll answer this for you. Because this is a repeated lesson in a lot of your Substacks. Always have a contract in place.
Yes. Such a repeated lesson. Oh my gosh. The amount of times I have done stuff with no contract and gotten bitten in the ass is just so many times.
It's funny too, because, I remember when I first started out and I got my first work for hire contract, and I almost felt weird about signing it because I'm like, well, I want to be, I don't want people to think I'm a legal kind of person and obsessed with that. I'm easy to work with, and things like that. But now it seems like, thanks to the internet and thanks to hearing these horror stories, creators are more open to that idea, and they understand it's not going to look bad on them to demand a contract.
Correct. It never will. It looks smart.
Yeah, actually, it looks way smart, right? Like all of a sudden, I remember negotiating a deal, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna have my lawyer look it over, and immediately, it wasn't a, oh, I don't want to work with this guy. It was, oh boy, this guy's got a lawyer. That's great. He knows,
right.
And that has, just even that sentence alone. And it was true. I have a lawyer, a business lawyer. He looks over contracts, a contract lawyer, all that fun stuff, and he's great.
You should.
Shout out to Mike Sarvati.
Like right now, like after, working at IDW as I have, dealing with like originals and stuff and taking in proposals, if you don't have a lawyer, people are shocked. Like, it's like, why don't you? Like, who's looking this over for you then? Like, you have to. It's just, at this point, number one, if you don't, it's so easy to get screwed over. So easy. It's just in your best interest. And and it's easier because publishers have lawyers. And so normally that's who talks to each other. You don't enter into the process at all. It's just, you give the okay once they're done arguing. Is how that goes. So
yeah, it's funny too, so it's just funny, and obviously we're completely on track here with what we were originally going to talk about. But the I had an artist though, so I work with Dren Productions, which is a small publisher. I work with Rogue Matter, and I'll promote both of those equally in a second here. But we actually sent an artist. He was an overseas guy, and we're like, here's a work for hire contract, and he's like, nah, I can't sign it. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't sign it? He's like, I can't sign it. I mean, we weren't actually talking. We're going back and forth via email. So, I'm obviously making up his, his tone, I guess. But it was just weird. And then he ended up not doing the project. I don't know what the resistance to it was, but again, just from the other end of the spectrum now, going from creator looking for a publisher to a publisher looking for a creator, to not have someone sign a contract, I thought was the weirdest thing in the world. It was like, what do you mean you're not, don't you, like, this is going to protect you. It also will protect me in the end, so that you can't do a Francesco and claim, copyright over anything. But at the same time, like, you're going to get paid, and that's what, this is guaranteeing you're going to get paid. But he didn't want to do it, which I thought was really.
It is really weird because normally, he must not have needed money. I don't know, but
I don't know.
In order to get paid, you have to have a contract. It attaches, like for us, the invoices get matched up against the contract. Without a contract, you can't invoice. It's a whole thing. So it just makes sense at this point. I wish I'd learned these lessons way earlier.
So If you're out there listening to us, please feel free to comment. We're on YouTube right now. We're on Facebook as well. So enjoy and please give us your contract horror stories or your contract joyful stories. We'll take them all. We're not after the negative here. It's not my show. I don't care if we get ratings. What do we care here? One thing now. All right. So we've been promoting your geekchic.substack.com. So everybody go and subscribe right now. All four of us. I'm sure there's going to be some viewers later on that will check this out. But since we're talking Substack as well, oh boy, boom. And now I got to get rid of your Geek Chic here. We're going to put boom, michaeldolce.substack.com. I got to change that to secret. Whatever. I'll keep it that way. I don't care what it is. I'll figure it out.
Look at that smile. How can I?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a fun studio day because I actually got Hassan to come up to Connecticut with me to be in in Calla Studios. Great photographer. She did a whole bunch of shots for us at for the show when I had the Secrets of Sire podcast. So that's where that came from.
Nice.
Go follow my Substack as well too. But I have launched my own as well too. And this is why, Kris Simon, I'm going to convince you right here and there, right here and now, to just don't even think about Patreon. Do only Substack.
All right, convince me because I'm about to leave Substack.
So all right, I know. So it's funny. We can dive into all the weeds here too, because I know there's a lot of publications being like Substack is publishing Nazis and stuff like that. And then I read an article and it's like there's like 10 accounts, and Substack has like thousands and thousands and thousands of accounts. And they're not even like really making money off these things. And it's kind of like, it's kind of seems to be like an overblown thing because Substack seems to be attracting a lot of independent journalists, a lot of independent writers, and a lot of independent people. And the people that seem to be, kind of writing all the articles about them seem to be, and again, this is just my perspective. I could be wrong. And yes, I am team Substack. So I can't say I'm 100% unbiased when I say that. Seems to be these people that are saying, don't go there. But meanwhile, in the midst of all that, I just noticed a ton more creators going to Substack, folks that ran newsletters through MailChimp or whatever the case was, were paying a fortune. I'm paying a fortune through MailChimp. I pay like $70 a month through MailChimp to send out a once a month newsletter that I dread writing. And so Substack is free to use. But the key that it is and why it's this could easily be a Substack versus MailChimp thing, but it doesn't have to be, because what I think Substack really is ultimately what a Patreon had always hoped it would be, is you have the power of your newsletter list. And that's something Patreon doesn't give you, maybe yet, maybe they have. But in my experience, I've had a Patreon for a few years now. It is so much work. Have you ever done a Kickstarter before, Kris Simon?
Yes, I have.
How much fun/work, and when I say fun, I'm using the total opposite word of fun, is it to put together a Kickstarter and to run a campaign?
Yeah, it sucks.
It's not fun, right? It is the opposite of fun.
It is the
Patreon is every day is your campaign. Like every day is your Kickstarter campaign.
Okay.
Please, because every day you're not posting, you're not building an audience through the platform. Whereas with something like Substack, what Substack basically did was like, hey, let's take all the cool things about Patreon, which is, all right, for anybody that doesn't realize, let's take a step back too. Substack is a subscriber-based newsletter platform. Okay. But what it gives you, and if you go to the Geek Chic Substack, you can actually see it's like a little micro website. You basically get a micro website. But again, the ease in which people can subscribe, and then if they want to subscribe, can actually start doing paid subscriptions to you. There's actually paywalls. There's content for paywalls and things like that. Is super, super easy. Patreon, Substack has that kind of stuff built in. Patreon has it built in, but you have to create all your tiers. You have to figure out what you're giving away. You have to figure out, like, you have to really, you're building, it's almost like you're building a Kickstarter campaign that you then have to do on a daily basis, because you don't have built-in followers. Not that you would have built-in followers automatically on Substack, but if you have a newsletter, boom, it's merged together and you're done.
I get what you're saying, because that was actually the whole reason why I didn't go to Patreon in the first place, is because I was like, well, I don't have tiers. I just have a newsletter. Like
Correct.
you can, maybe I'll have a podcast, coming out, and then maybe I'll want to promote that and something else, but I don't know what that is right now, So right now it's just a newsletter, and I don't want to do tiers. I was like, that's exactly right. And I thought, if I'm going to charge for anything, it'll be exclusive interviews and it'll be the podcast. So it'll be one of those two things.
Yep.
So, yeah, that was, I have to say, one of the turnoffs of Patreon for me. However, it seems like now, and this is what I'm not crazy about, is that these platforms are, they're just to use. That's all they are. They're a tool.
Yes.
They're a tool for you to use. And people are taking it incredibly personally. And I understand that.
No question. No kidding. You don't internet very often, do you?
I understand the whole Nazi thing. And I also understand that there was something about trans people. There was also something going on there with Substack against trans people. I don't know what that was about. I didn't look into it.
Basically, what it comes down to, Substack is a platform that does not moderate your content unless you are literally writing something that will incite violence.
Right. Which I did read that's their stance, but also they're a privately owned company, so they can boot people off if they really want to, and they're not. They're just not. And I don't understand why, if the majority of people are upset about 10 Nazis that are on there, just boot off the freaking Nazis. Like that's mine. Like, I'm like, just do it, because they're getting all this publicity about it, and it's not good.
The problem with doing that, and this is the logic behind it, is once you start moderating content, then you start deciding what is, and it goes beyond just the obvious ones, right? It goes beyond like the, yes, Nazis are bad. We can all agree Nazis are bad. And they said in their public statement, we wish no one had these views, and it stinks. But he says, but as soon as we start censoring people, it becomes a censorship thing, which is a whole other issue that today's artists are very interested. I'm fascinated by this, because I was always raised on the belief, as going to a liberal arts school, as a liberal minded person. And that's not necessarily my political views necessarily, but it's what I was surrounded by in an artist community, was the idea of censorship is wrong. If I want to draw piss Christ and put it in a museum, and someone, who's Christian says you can't do that, well, that's censorship, and that's wrong. And the idea of censoring people is the issue that you start getting down a slippery slope. Content moderation, in and of itself, when it's threats against somebody, that's obviously, that's different. That's harassment. When you're writing articles, and again, the articles that are being written aren't necessarily, at least this is from what I read about it. And again, it's from another another pro Substack campaign or thing that I read it about. But they do good work. They go in there and they're like, we found the accounts in question, and they were saying this or that. The idea that Substack comes back with, though, and again, we're veering off topic a little bit, but it's okay. It's fun. Is the censorship angle. They think that once you start censoring people, it just creates more. It actually does things. It's worse. It actually then makes a bigger deal out of it, because then the other side pushes back, and then the other side pushes back, and then the other side pushes back, and then it escalates things, rather than the amount of traffic that these quote unquote Nazi accounts. And again, it's like some are using Nazi symbols, some are saying things like, that can be interpreted as a white supremacist type of thinking. But there aren't any, like, as far as I can understand, there aren't like Hail Hitler pages or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But what it does when you start censoring these things is you start bringing attention to it. I just read the press release that Substack put out.
Yeah, I read it too. But also, like, we can argue that that's why Twitter went down the tubes, is because there was no censorship, and there was no, they tried to keep up with kicking people off, but it became a cesspool. And I think that's what people are afraid is going to happen to Substack when you don't have like a moderation. It's a
little different, though, because in a sense, so this is interesting about Substack, and this is actually one of the pluses as well, too, that I like versus Patreon, right? It has a little community. you can put a note, which is basically a tweet. It's the same thing.
Right.
They
Yeah,
basically are a Twitter,
Mhm.
and then they have their comment sections as well too. But the thing is, you have to actually subscribe to people's newsletter. It's not like Twitter in the same sense where you're going on and you just have like a random feed of just nonsense being, put. And that's every social media feed, right? It's like Facebook is like that.
Right.
Twitter's like that. It's just Instagram is just an endless stream of feed and things like that. I think personally, I mean, I literally subscribe to about 5 people on Substack, 6 people on Substack. So I enjoy getting their newsletters and I enjoy getting their articles. I follow journalists on Substack. I follow writers on Substack, and I really enjoy getting news from it. I've subscribed to some people and then I've unsubscribed because I stopped enjoying getting their newsletters. Not because there was anything wrong with it. I just lost interest in what they were sending me. And so for me, Substack to me is it's just a newsletter platform. It's not as much as a community as what Twitter is. Twitter is like you go on there, you're bombarded by hundreds of thousands of people. Not that Substack doesn't want you to build your own community and interact with other people. I found a guy, Cole Haddon. His Substack is amazing. He's a screenwriter and a graphic novel writer. But apparently I've never heard of him, but he ran he was a showrunner on Bram Stoker's Dracula series that came out in like 2013 on NBC, but he also, I guess he knows a lot of people in comics. I had no idea. But I stumbled across his Substack and it's awesome. Like it's absolutely awesome. And, so I hear what you're saying in terms of that, but the central thing is not the community. The central thing is you're building it's like you said, it's a platform for you to build your brand up.
Yeah.
And to me, I feel like it is just so much more effective because everything that I get isn't really a newsletter anymore. It's like an article. And that's to me, like the most important thing. Like maybe artists will favor Patreon. And again, please comment. We haven't gotten any, which is surprising. Usually last time I was on it, I got a bunch of comments.
Yeah. I'm very curious because I very much struggle with this because I want to be supportive. And I feel like people have been leaving Substack, and there's other options. I've heard of Beehive. There's all these other ones that people are going to. At this point, they're like scattering to the wind. They're not going to one different one. And so that's why it's so hard. It's so hard to figure out what exactly to do. And at this point, my subscriber isn't as big to like cause me a problem if I ever want to switch over to something else.
Okay. So you're saying that now is the time if you're going to do it.
If I'm going to do it, I would like to do it now. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Did you have a pre-existing subscriber list to a newsletter prior to this?
No.
Okay. So you really are at the ground floor with all this stuff.
Yes. I started from scratch.
And you started a Patreon account as well, right?
Yeah. I started a Patreon account, but it hasn't been activated. It's there.
What in terms of, and this is great because I set my Patreon account up many, many years ago. And so it's probably easier. It's probably easier for, there's mine. It's probably easier for you to tell me now, having just recently set up both. What was an easier experience or was it the same?
It's about the same, to be honest. It's
okay.
And it's a pain in the ass, both of them. They're, it's uploading your picture, it's writing your bio, it's what's this about, for Patreon, you don't have to do any tiers. Like you don't. It'll default to $5 if someone wants to give it to you. But right now, newsletter free. It's only if you want to start activating tiers that you.
Wait, is this Patreon or this is Patreon you're talking? Okay,
Patreon, yeah. Substack is a little limiting for me only because when I write the newsletter, it doesn't have all the features I would like. Sometimes like I really want to do like quote boxes and I can't do it. Like there's just no options.
Got it.
It's things like that where I'm like, I would really like to be a little more creative with this, but all I can really do is add an image or
correct.
Yeah. And it's just not very creative for me. I don't know if Patreon is though, because at this moment I haven't written a new one on that. I've only inputted old columns.
Yeah, get back to me on that when you do, because I remember Patreon being just as cumbersome in terms of writing. I actually found Substack. So I'll say this from an end user perspective, right? I follow some folks on Patreon, and I follow a lot of folks on Substack. From the end user experience, I look forward each and every time to the way it gets delivered to me as a consumer, not necessarily me as a creator.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so how does it get delivered differently?
And I don't mean necessarily in a delivery method. I just mean that the visual appearance of it,
okay,
to me, is much more appealing. And I'll give you an example. I'm on the Comics Tribe. That's a comic book company, Comics Tribe. I'm on their newsletter. They just switched over to Substack, and now when they deliver, and it's weird because it's essentially the same kind of content, but it's the way the subject line and the header is. It's more article based, it feels like to me, rather than newsletter based, even though a lot of it's still newsletter based. And I just feel as if, well, first of all, doesn't go in my junk box. That's a big thing right there. Their old newsletter used to go in my junk box a lot too. I used to end up getting their MailChimp newsletter, and it used to go in my junk box. This one, I've never had. I'm not gonna say never. I've very rarely had a Substack that I subscribe to go into a junk box.
Same here.
That's huge. Then when it comes into my inbox, the format is headline, byline, text immediately. And again, I feel like as if I'm reading an article. And so when I get your Substacks coming in, I'm like, oh, this is really awesome. Versus Patreon, when I used to get the Patreon stuff, it was, I follow our mutual friend Tony Moy. I'd follow his. Tony Moy released a new post. Here's his new post, and it would be a post, and it would be.
So you can't read it in your email.
You have to click. You read a little bit of it, and then you click, and then you have to go to the website, and that's where I'm sitting there saying, that's the delivery method that I don't like. Because now all of a sudden I'm not. All right, I just got it in my my email inbox. Boom, I'm reading it. Like, that's it. I'm there. I'm reading it.
Exactly. That's what I like about it too, is that people can just read the email and be done. They don't have to go anywhere.
The app is another thing that I love. The Substack app is amazing. Because again, I go right to my inbox.
On the app, there's no writer dashboard on the app.
No, there's no, which is interesting. I agree with you. That's a. We'll see. We'll see what they do about that.
So I always I cannot go into the app and write my newsletter. Like, I have to do it either on my laptop or I have to go into my browser on my phone, which to me defeats the purpose of having an app. So
look at this. We have our first comment. This is probably off topic and typical, but I was curious if you all talked about pitching to publishers or formatting. We can absolutely talk about pitching to publishers. I mean, Kris, you've accepted many a pitch from aspiring young writers like myself, throughout time. So talk about, give me your number one pet peeve when accepting pitches.
My number one pet peeve.
Like your number one, like, oh man, this will put you to the top of my stack of submissions, or this will put you to the bottom of my stack of submissions when you get it.
I guess if you just don't follow directions, that's the biggest one. Like, if I ask for, please tell me what your pitch is in like 2 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs, and you send me 5 pages, that'll piss me off. So if you can't be succinct, how good of a writer are you? But otherwise, I guess sending a zip file which means that you can't shrink your stuff into a PDF. I don't know. There's really nothing. Like, anything is, I've been doing this so long, I'm probably the worst person to ask because I've seen it all. And I'm just like, whatever at this point. People do what they do. But I think overall, I would have to say, if I were to give advice on pitching, it really has to be personal at this point, because I feel like we've seen everything. There's literally no new ideas that are coming our way at this moment. And so it's got to be something that is personal to the person either writing it or drawing it, like meaningful. And that doesn't mean that it can't be superhero or whatever. It just has to connect to something personal where I can literally feel the emotions of the people writing and creating the project. Like their heart and soul have been poured into it, because that's what makes it special. It's you can't just be like, well, I'm going to just jot off this and see if it gets accepted. Like, we see right through that immediately. It's like, So
I think that's a really important one. And I think to this day, no joke, I suck at pitches. I suck at written pitches. I'm not good at it. It's
people
not
do. It's
something
the
that I'm
hardest
not
part. Yeah.
I'm not trying to get good at it. I'm not putting the work into it, but I feel like every once in a while I land on a pitch and I'll be like, this is a great pitch, and I think it should get accepted. And then I'll bounce it around and maybe it will or maybe it won't. But I always feel like it's very difficult to do exactly what you just said, which is to pour, all that energy into a succinct, like 3-paragraph thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard. People do it. I see it. It does happen.
Yeah.
And also it doesn't hurt to tell why the story is important. There's nothing preventing a cover letter or an email ahead of the pitch to say, listen, like, this is very important to me because XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
I think it lends itself to do that because, you're forming a connection with the person reading the pitch. So, and that's always helpful, no matter who they are, and we get a lot of pitches. It's like, it's pretty consistent. And, it's kind of funny because it was strange at IDW because everybody's different. And,
Mm-hmm.
at Image, you had to have everything completed and all had to be done, everything. Like at IDW, it wasn't the same. It was like, we would take a writer's pitch and pair them up with, we have a whole roster of artists that we could pair up with a pitch, a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And also vice versa. If an artist pitched us something and didn't have a writer but needed one, we know all the writers, so it kind of varies from publisher to publisher.
Yeah.
And most of the time, when I was working for video games, we would have an IP already, like a video game.
Sure.
We would ask for pitches. So we'd connect with a writer or an artist that we really liked, and we'd say, hey, can you pitch us what you do with these characters? Like, here's like a demo of the game,
Mm-hmm.
and they would pitch us. And if we didn't like it, we didn't like it. And we'd go to somebody else, So, it really varies these days. There's so many people out there that are trying to break in, that you really have to stand out. And that's unfortunate. It's no longer, going to a bar and buying a drink and pitching them in person and being like, I got a deal. Like,
yeah.
Anymore. Yeah.
This is a loaded question because we're running out of time here, but the idea of breaking into me is such an antiquated notion because of things like Substack. See how I bring it all full circle?
Kickstarter, all of these things. You don't need a publisher any longer.
I know.
You can do it yourself if you can.
If you can build an audience.
You can build
now, the only thing I would sit there and say that a publisher brings, and that image eye logo that I had on Descendant when I first, that was my Image book that I, got released. We didn't sell a lot for Image standards, but I sold, 5 times as many books that I'd ever sold by having an Image eye.
And it's also distribution. Like right. you're pitching to a specific audience instead of retailers when you do Kickstarter. So that's the only difference where, you're not in any catalogs. You're not, you're basically just on social media, which is a little bit more difficult. However, it does make you published if you do that. So you're no longer an unpublished person. You no longer don't have that experience. You have knowledge, and you can take that with you wherever you go. So,
yeah, I think that's a great way to sum it up. So, all right, real quick before we go, we're gonna have you back on again, or maybe, okay, wait, hang on. Buddy's gonna have to have me back on again, and then I'll have you back on again.
Buddy's asked me to be on. He has. I'm not gonna crap on Buddy because he has approached me several times. So
I'm not crapping on him at all. I'm literally saying he just got to invite me on, then I can invite you on, and then we'll get on. That's how it works. See, it's really good. Did I convince you to stay with Substack, or are you going to try the Patreon route?
You did sway me towards Substack because I know a lot of people who are sticking with Substack despite the Nazis. So, and I was wondering why, and now I know why, because Patreon is it's not much better. So,
no, not. I think what it comes down to, and this is my personal pledge for like the next 5 years is, even though ironically I've actually been on Twitter more and more lately, and I've been on social media more and more lately because I'm trying to build up my social media following. I'm not going to listen to social media anymore because I think it's all like, all right, everyone's going on and on about this, and it's kind of ironic, right? It's a weird way to introduce the whole like which platform is better. Oh, Nazis. What? Like what? Like if someone was coming on here and they're like, oh, what's a Substack all about? I don't know. No, it's not all Nazis. There's like 3 million different like posts that are up there. There's so much stuff up there. It is a literally it's a newsletter platform, and that's what Patreon's kind of like a, not quite the same.
Which thanks for like cluing me into Tony Moy's stuff, because Tony was at my wedding in 1999. We go way back.
Yeah.
So I did not know he had a Patreon newsletter, so I'm gonna have to go look that up and subscribe.
Yeah, he had his World War II comic on there. Then he switched it over to Webtoon. See, again, there's so many platforms out there.
Yep. Well, he can make more money off of Webtoon, guaranteed.
Maybe that's the thing. Again, it's all about how much audience gets brought there, and if it's not manga, it's not selling on Webtoons right now. I mean, that's the other thing you kind of have to factor in. There's so many things.
Within 3 years, it will be.
I don't disagree with you, actually. I think Webtoons is another thing I'm looking. Boy, we'll have another discussion on Webtoons. But here's the thing. I'm going to just try to stay as, I'm going to just do my thing and apply myself to this platform. Why? Because I'm doing it from not a creator standpoint. I'm doing it from a user standpoint. I really enjoy getting those Substack emails like every day. I get news from it. I get comic book stuff from it. I get podcast stuff from it. I love the GeekChic stuff, which you can go to geekchic.substack.com. I love getting your articles once a week. And I wouldn't have gotten those if you're on Patreon. Like I wouldn't have found you on Patreon. Right. Maybe I would have, maybe I wouldn't have. I don't know. But I wouldn't have enjoyed the experience because I would have gotten Kris Simon, made a new post. Click here. And I would have been like, I don't want to click here.
Yeah.
I want to just read it. And I don't have time to read it. And I frequent the app. So from a user experience, that's why I'm biased. Don't get me wrong. I don't know if I'm convincing anybody, but from an end user experience, I just love the whole end user experience of Substack versus Patreon. And so I do hope you stick with it because I do enjoy your newsletters, and I'll stop reading them if you're on Patreon.
Yeah. Okay. You convinced me.
All right. Real quick before we go to geekchic.substack.com, subscribe. It's free. You can also, again, look at me. Boom. We're going to have a Substack as well, too. Go to michaeldolce.substack.com. I'm kicking this thing off this week, hopefully. I'm going to knock on wood for that one. And if you just like, actual comic book stuff, go check out Roman's Rise. Issue 1 is totally free. You can go download it for free, and that is on roguematter.com. I'm going to put that in the thing right now. Look at how much preparation I did for this. I forgot to put my own plug there. There it is. Boom. roguematter.com. You can download Roman's Rise issue 1 for free. Written by Team Rogue and myself as well too. It's a fun homage to Big Trouble in Little China with its own unique kick to it. All right, Kris, thank you so much as I try to maneuver how I can get rid of this stuff, and I can get rid of this stuff here. And there we are. We're back. Look at that. Thank you so much for jumping on.
Thanks for having me.
And this has been a little long, got to be honest with you, but fun episode of Comic Book School Live. We'll see you guys next time.